Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Broker, and I'm here as usual with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo, and it's just the three of us this week. And we're going to talk about, we don't usually cover writing topics on here because it's the marketing show, and I don't know about the guys, but I always feel kind of presumptuous trying to teach anything about writing because there are so many people out there that are much better at teaching that stuff, and they're much fresher on it, I guess. They're actually out there.
A teacher, I am not.
Yeah, a lot of it's intuitive at this point. Like things I knew back when I was learning or doing the workshops, it's in the head and I couldn't tell you now. So, but we are going to talk about kind of what we've experienced with our own series and try to give some tips on what it takes to create a successful series. Because, half of it is marketing, right? But half of it is actually having something that people want to read and that kind of sells itself in a way. So that's going to be the subject for today. But I don't know, do you guys have any news you want to talk about before we jump into that?
I actually hit my deadline with Amazon. We were just talking about Amazon a couple of days early, and actually I got the cover here. Let's see here. Got even clever and put my dog on the cover again there. So that and a dragon. So that
you're just stacking the deck.
Yeah, you got the bases covered. That should be a bestseller right there automatically.
Well, the pre-orders are doing pretty good. I'm getting a lot of people anxious to read it, and they're like, "Okay, that's great. When do you get to release the next one?" I'm like, "Come on, man! It's like a week from the release of this one. Give me a freaking break." But I'm doing good. Usually it's one a year. This makes number 3 this year, so I'm doing better.
They should definitely be happy. Now, are you doing a pre-order everywhere, or not, or just Amazon, or?
Amazon and Smashwords.
Okay. So I'll talk about pre-orders on my section too, but Joe, did you want to throw out any news first?
Sure. I probably before I go to bed tonight, I'm gonna hit 90,000 words on my next book, which is my book 4 on the sci-fi series. I don't know if this is the halfway point or not. I hope it is, because this is way too long to be only halfway. So
I was just asking you, is this a quarter of the way? Is it halfway?
I don't know. Hopefully there should be some aggressive edits for this one before I put it out, because I don't really want to go over 150,000 words. But that's sort of how it goes. That's the thing I was just saying, is the problem is I'm writing scenes where I'm like, I'm pretty sure this will get cut if I got to do cuts. But I still have to finish writing that scene that's probably going to end up cut. My brain's not always fully functional. And I also have an old book. Like we'd spoken in the past, don't throw anything away. It might seem stupid now, but you might be able to fix it later. The book that's been sitting on my shelf since basically 2010 because it was too stupid to release has just gone to the editor. She'll tell me if it's too stupid to release, but if it isn't, then it'll go out sometime next year.
So what are you expecting her to go back and go, oh, damn, dude, don't do it?
I'm hoping that we've had her on the show, Tammy Salyer. I'm hoping that she's honest enough to say, like, this one probably was on the shelf for a reason. But actually, what I'm hoping is she'll say, actually, this is quite good. You should release it immediately. But I'm not anticipating that.
You don't even need my help. It's just so flawless. Put it out there now.
Yeah, but those are the two things I got going on.
Well, 150,000 words might not be bad if you were to sign up for the new Kindle Unlimited, which we should talk about in a minute. I did want to say with pre-orders, I did one. I'm doing a new one for my 6th Dragon Blood book, and the last time I did it like Jeff, I just went through Smashwords to get into Barnes & Noble, because if you go into their dashboard, they don't have anything that says, pre-orders like this. But this time I thought, well, let me just see if I can possibly go direct, not just to save money, but, well, because you can actually monitor and see like how many pre-orders you're getting, which with Smashwords I couldn't, and I don't know if Draft to Digital is the same or not, but they didn't report like, oh, you've had this many pre-order sales at Barnes & Noble.
Only Apple does that through Smashwords.
And then also, if you later want to switch, because I directly upload everything to Barnes & Noble, but last time, because I went through Smashwords with the pre-order book 5, now I don't want to like directly upload it and risk losing the ranking and the reviews and that kind of thing, so I've just been leaving it at Smashwords, which is fine, but it's actually making pretty good money, like enough where I'm like, oh, well, I'm giving them 5% just because, really for no reason. So this time I tried to do it with Apple on my own because I already have an iTunes producer thing, and I've done the last few books direct to Apple. And it was pretty easy. I was not sure because I didn't really want to upload the whole file. I wasn't sure if they would let me just upload the cover and the description and be good to go. But they did. No complaints. It's in the store now. And with Amazon, I put a dummy file in there. I think I put the rough draft of 50,000 words that I had. So let's hope that is not the file that goes out. That would not be good.
Well, Amazon will send out some nasty emails like, you must give us the completed manuscript by 10 days before release date or you will forfeit. I'm like, dude, really? I'm well aware of it. It's the same damn message you've been sending me the last 3 weeks in a row here, so I'm not going to forget. But unlike you probably have like the Amazon CEO on speed dial, don't you, Lindsay? And the other one's Barnes & Noble CEO and Apples and Kobos.
Sure. Of course I do. No, I get those same emails, and I got one right like 2 minutes after I uploaded it. Like, you need to upload the final file here by this date. It's like, I know, I understand that. Thank you. But what was kind of news was with Barnes & Noble, I decided to email them because I saw something in there, somewhere on their site there, that some publishers, they were now allowing to do direct pre-orders. And I thought, well, what the heck, I'll email them and you never know. And I said, hey, my Dragonblood series sells pretty well here. Would you consider allowing me to put up my next book for pre-order? And it was actually really easy. Like within 2 hours, I got an email back that said, your account is enabled to list pre-orders now. So I don't know if it's the thing where you just have to email and ask. Like, do you actually have to be a good seller there? I have no idea, so I can't tell you.
It's Miss Broker. Here, hold on. We'll fix it. We'll get our IT department on it. Yeah.
No, but actually it was the self-publishing podcast guys that had done it first, and I remember them talking about, they actually had one of the reps on the show, and I have her email address. I'm going to try to get her on the show eventually too. But so yeah, it was. I couldn't say it for everyone. I don't know if it's for everyone or if it's just any. But it doesn't hurt to ask if you're hoping to do that, especially if you have a series that sells at Barnes & Noble. That probably helps.
So they have to tweak your account in some fashion to let you submit a pre-order.
Yes, but apparently it's easy because they did it right away, and it looks like I can do it for all books now. It wasn't like I was just asking for that specific book. So there's my news there. In other news, my pen name is doing a serial, which in 6 parts. I've put 4 parts up now. I'm doing them once a week, and just as an experiment. I had originally designed this under the old Kindle Unlimited. I was actually going to try to game the system, but as usual, the system changes before I get around to to thinking maybe I could try that. First I have to be indignant about it for like 6 to 10 months, like gaming the system. Then I start thinking, maybe. And then when I do it, it's changed.
Yep.
But so the perks of doing the serial, though, are that I think by having something come out every week, you have a little more chance of having more visibility in the charts. It's not selling like gangbusters, but the first one is in the top 20 for its little category, and then there's a couple more in the 20 to 40. So you're appearing in more places, and it's been picking up a little bit and getting quite a few borrows now that the new system. That's actually not a bad thing if you've got longer books. So like the whole serial is 120,000 words or something. So it's like a novel, but I'm going to do a write-up on my blog at the end and see if it was worth it to just put it out. I think what happens is you could be in the sales charts longer for your category in the rankings, possibly by having more things out there. And I haven't done this because mine doesn't really qualify, but if you had something where it qualified in one category, but it could also be in like 3 other categories, by putting multiple episodes out, you could possibly, like this week I'm in space opera, next week I'm going to be in military sci-fi, the week after that I'm going to be in men's adventure fiction. So it could possibly be a way to appear in some of the charts in more places than the usual couple.
It would probably also help your author rank. I don't know how that's calculated, but it seems like having multiple books ranking reasonably high will boost your author rank too.
That is true. I have no idea if there's any perk to having a good author rank. Every now and then I randomly click on it to see if I am ahead of any like really cool people that have been publishing forever, which is always fun, even if it only lasts for a week and they're there for like ever, but hey.
I've taken screenshots of that stuff. I have a whole folder of, it's called Proof of Awesome when I'm trying to build my confidence.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
when you do everything to appear in a list for 1 week, and all these other books have been there for 697 weeks, and you're like, I was still there. It still counts.
Yeah,
I have a
I do.
screenshot of myself ahead of H.G. Wells. I'm like, take that, 100 years on the list.
Yeah, I've had a couple of mine. The permafreeze I've hit all the way up to #1 on like epic fantasy whatnot. I'm like, oh my god! I'm taking screen captures from my iPad, and I'm scrolling down, make sure I can like stitch it all together, and make one big long picture there. But I have quite a few of those pictures, so yeah, I don't delete those suckers. No way. That's proof, man.
Yeah, I have the screenshot of my books in the steampunk category in like the top 5 slots because I released a pre-order, which, like we've talked about before, is not a very big category, so it's not like, ooh, so exciting. It doesn't mean you're making piles of money necessarily, but like still, it's 5 slots and they're mine.
Darn right. I bragged when you were 4 of the slots, and I was one of them.
Oh, how did your BookBub ad go? Did you see some good sell-through on to the second book?
Yeah, well, I did. I did see a fair amount of sell through. It wasn't like as good as my fantasy ads have done, but there's not as many reviews and stuff on my first book. Plus, it wasn't a free ad; it was my first non-free ad. It absolutely paid for itself, and it probably doubled the sales of the following book for a couple of weeks. So summer's not always the strongest time for sales, and it's really sort of kept me level as opposed to drooping, which is nice.
Yes, I love one thing we can talk about with series is when you have multiple series going, you can kind of just alternate with the advertising sites. Whereas if you only have one series and one book one that you always advertise, you kind of have to wait like 6 months usually to get going.
It's
But
true.
all right. Lastly, we already kind of talked about this, but for those who have not been following the Kindle Unlimited drama, they've released version 2 basically. Before you got paid for every borrow in which a person read at least 10% of the book. It didn't matter whether the book was 500 pages or 5 pages. If they hit 10%, you made money. And they have since changed it as of July so that they calculate the pages in each book. Apparently they do something so I think the front matter and back matter might not be counted, or I don't know. They figure it out. You can't game it with formatting, I'm told. Or maybe you can, I don't know. You can't put like 2 words on a page. But so now people are paid based on how many pages were read by the person that borrowed the book. And it ended up being like 0.0058 cents per page for July, which was,
Okay. Those
yeah.
numbers are kind of hard to crunch in your head to find
Come
out how
on,
your
how
book's going
many?
to do.
Right there, I had 200,000 reads. What is it, Joe?
I couldn't tell you. Hold on, I'll get my thing out.
I expect more from a computer science major over there.
I use calculators.
All right. Well, no, it was about $1,000, which was actually only because I had a BookBub ad that the pen name had that many page reads. But I decided after reading Rachel Aaron's post, who we've had on the show before, she wrote a post about how many piles she was making under the new system with only like one book and the second one coming out. But she writes pretty long books. Like I think she said the first one was 120,000. This is like Nice Dragons Finish Last, I think is the name of it. And then the next one's 170,000. So the new system really rewards possibly people like us who write fantasy and science fiction stuff that is long and epic. So it's something to think about. I'm still not moving my stuff under my name because, as we've talked about before, I have readers on other platforms, and I still believe being wide is a good plan
I
just
agree.
for job security purposes.
Totally.
But if you have a book or a series or a pen name and you're just kind of playing around with it, it's something maybe to consider trying. Or if you're a new author and you're just really trying to figure out how to get a boost. After reading Rachel's post, I pretty much dumped all of my pen name stuff in KDP Select, which Joe knows because it kind of goobered up something that is supposed to not be in Select in November. Fortunately,
Yeah,
it'll
I don't
come
think
out.
it'll be an issue. Yeah.
Yeah. And I noticed right away the sales rankings improved, even on the older stuff that's not related to the serial at all. I went from I think a lot of them were hanging around 50, 70,000 in the Amazon store, are now down under 20,000 again, and I haven't done anything to promote those books. So those borrows do help if you're able to get at least some visibility. If you're doing promos and stuff. I think if you just put it in there and you didn't have any sales before, it might not do anything. You need to have some visibility at least, some people looking you up. but
Yeah,
it can definitely help with the sales ranking.
yeah. If you're just starting out, you don't really have hardly any sales whatsoever. Feel free to give it a try. Just I can't do it. I started in 2010. I have readers in every platform that there is, and they would kill me if I pulled everything and just went with Amazon. As well as I just hate the whole bullying tactics Amazon's doing with that. So I won't be doing it.
Yes, I totally understand, but boy, the temptation can be there sometimes, especially, I think in my case, I sell enough that I probably could get enough page reads. They give bonuses if I heard this
Hmm.
time, if you were like above 2 million page reads, you got an extra $1,000 or an extra such and such. And I have a feeling I'd probably make more overall if I went all in with Amazon with all my stuff. But like Jeff, I hate the idea of it. I would hate abandoning my readers that are on other platforms, and we've already discussed before how lazy I am. Do you know how many times The Emperor's Edge is out there in places for free? It's like on Wattpad, it's on
Oh, I hear
Scribd,
you
it's
laughing. I'm sorry.
it'd be crazy to try and go and delete everything. What a pain. So
Literally during this conversation, I was looking to see how many books did I sell of that ill-fated superhero book. Maybe it's worth trying that one out. I'd only be giving up 10 sales a month if I put it on Amazon, but then I was like, I'd have to take it down everywhere and then make sure it was down everywhere. Heck with that.
And laziness kicks in, and we're like, the saves us
Laziness
once again.
wins.
well, yeah, and with my pen name, she wasn't making a lot. I like talking about myself in third person. It's good. She wasn't making a lot on the other stores, so it's easier. Even what I'd done a BookBub ad back in April and had a couple books in the other stores, and there was some sell through. Barnes and Noble did okay, but I think I probably made more in the last week in KU than I did in the last 6 months of having the books on the other sites. So yeah, I think for the pen name too, it's actually easier for me just to upload to Amazon and not have to worry about all the other sites and all the marketing, since I'm not trying to make my pen name a household name and I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, I think it's anyway,
Excuse me, sorry. Dusty.
just something to think about, that it is possible to be making some pretty good money if you're writing novels now, as opposed to the shorter stuff that was doing just as well before. Um, yeah, I think we've talked about that enough. Yes?
Sure.
All right, well, let's go ahead and wait, Jeff, you have a note about cleaning up the first trilogy.
Oh yeah,
What is
yeah,
that?
that's right. My first three books when I first released them, I will admit my second and third one actually aren't too bad. My first one, ye gads, I need to clean it up. I was actually thinking about doing it. I'm gonna just go through it. It's like, okay, stop all the multiple head hopping. Try and clean up the verbiage, and just because I didn't really have anyone editing, anyone proofreading, or just me saying, hey, what do you think about this? And a lot of people like it, but I think a lot of people more would like it if it didn't look like a freaking moron wrote it. So I'm gonna be cleaning up that one and re-releasing them essentially.
Well, that's something kind of interesting that can lead us into our series discussion, is that for a lot of authors, your first book that you publish is maybe not your best book, but if it's book one in a series, it could be somebody's first experience with you. So yeah, what should you do? Should you go back and clean it up later, or I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've thought about that because I've had some people that have said to me that, you know what, that's your first one. It shows you that you're growing as a writer and getting better. When you look at the books as they keep coming out, they keep getting better. Because the reviews, the first review of the first book, on average, I think like just under 4 stars out of 5, and then each one that's released gets marginally stronger there. So I was like, everyone hates George Lucas for going back and changing all the Star Wars movies. I keep redoing it. Do I really want to tinker with it? It's like, yeah, maybe, but I don't know. I mean, I want to do it, but that's the part I'm torn about. I don't know if I should really screw around with it because that's the one that everyone likes that pulled them into the series to begin with. So yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, I've gone back and fixed glaring errors and stuff, but when it comes to restructuring the story and actually rewriting portions, the only thing I've done, and I haven't even done it for the official release, it just various re-releases, is gone back and added chapters because that was a big complaint, but it still hasn't changed the story at all. I really don't want there to be two versions of my story out. I want the same plot and the same delivery to be there. It's again, it's the first thing I wrote, not the strongest thing, but I feel like. It'd be nice if it represented my current level of writing, but you could just start a new series for that if you wanted if you want your series starter to be representative of your current stuff. I want the consistency. I want the people who were my fans from the beginning to have the same experience as the people who became fans later. So I don't think I would clean up beyond any fixing glaring errors.
I don't know. That laziness thing is kicking in. That means I really don't have to do too much with it. So,
Yeah, once again, inactivity is often the best activity.
seriously.
It may depend too on how long of a series you've written based on that first book. Like if you're on book 8, with my Emperor's Edge stuff, I am up to 9 books now, 7 in the original series, and then a couple other add-ons. And I'm still proud of that first book, but I can definitely see it felt like a first novel. Fortunately, I'd gone through a workshop and kind of had a lot of feedback in it and stuff, so I don't think it's too horrible. Some people have read it and liked it, but I do sometimes think maybe there's some awkward stuff in there that I've kind of grown out of a little bit of as a writer. But yeah, you can always, if you don't want to go back and change it, start a new series too as an option. And
yeah, that's a good point.
Or just create a new entry point, like something Jim Butcher does that I've noticed. If you read all of his stuff in like rapid succession, is every now and then you'll get a book that sort of reintroduces all the main points and summarizes the previous points. So you can sort of start pitching that as your series starter, or at least as your current series hook. I've seen a few people will sort of restart series in that way. Comic book writers do it too.
Yeah, I could see that, especially, doesn't he have like 15 or 20 Dresden Foil books now?
Does.
It's a lot.
It's a bunch.
Yeah, I think it would depend if you could actually do that. I've kind of got a series where it's very much the last book ends, it goes right into the next one, still part of a big overarching plot. Then I have another one where they're more complete stories where I could see that working. So, something to think about.
Yep.
As we go into the topic of our show, what does it take to write a series that people want to buy? And I thought it would be fun, educational, horrible, taxing, I don't know, to go through and have each of us share like 3 things that we found for ourselves. And it's just for ourselves. It's not necessarily going to work for everybody. Things that in our own series, because I think we've all had pretty good luck selling books and bringing in fans that are loyal, and I think we've all got like fan art and stuff like that. So we must be doing something right. You can totally ignore us. If you disagree, we will not be offended.
Absolutely true.
Lindsay, what 3 items do you have on your list?
All right. Well, 3 things you can do, or that I did totally accidentally or possibly on purpose, to kind of get people to enjoy the series, get into it, and want to stick with it for 7 books or however you end up writing. Now, one of the things that I found that was intentional, although at the time I wasn't thinking like, how can I string people along so they want to read all 7 books, was that I had kind of a romance with my main 2 characters that didn't start out as a romance. It started out with her trying to kill him, so you know how these relationships start. And it very gradually over the course of this series, they got to be friends and eventually came together in the last book, in the epilogue of the last book. So I really strung them along there. And that was never my intention to like make it the one thing people were reading for. I was just very much like, the romance is a secondary thing. There's more going on. It wasn't meant to be romantic fantasy by any means. But I found that a lot of the fan art and a lot of the fan stories came out as I was publishing the series, and people were like, are they ever going to get together? Are they ever going to get together? These would be probably more the female readers. But, I remember that when I was watching the X-Files back in the day, too. Like our Scully and Mulder, those guys.
Sculder?
That
Sculder and
that
Molly.
one guy. Are they ever going to hook up? Because this is what women like. Not all, just generalizing. We enjoy maybe the action and the adventure, but we enjoy the characters too. And that's probably a big reason why I suffered through 8 seasons of Stargate SG-1. I really enjoyed the first 4 seasons or so, but I kind of checked out after Richard Dean Anderson was like a guest in the series. But I kept watching it anyway because I'm like, are Carter and O'Neill ever going to get together? What the heck? So that can be a powerful thing that, some readers will be really into that and wonder if these characters are going to get together, and that can be part of what keeps them reading. So that's one of my things. If that floats your boat, or if you're excited about writing that kind of thing, it's something to consider. On the flip side, if you kind of have them get together in the first book, then then it's kind of hard to keep that relationship interesting also. And I've seen authors bring in like not threesomes, but like a third character to add conflict. Is this
Yeah.
relationship gonna last? And
Construct the love triangle.
yeah, and I'm like, well, why didn't you just not have them get together right away, and you don't have to do all this crazy stuff? But so that, because those things can annoy some readers when you're trying to make conflict.
Have you had readers say that to you?
I haven't done that like that. I don't do those things. I've had readers thank me for not adding weird drama like that. And it's just, I put so much conflict usually in the story itself that I don't feel the need to really have a whole lot of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I remember the two characters you're talking about when they first met. I remember the male character saying to the female character, "Who wants you dead?"
Yes, if you were sent to assassinate me, somebody's trying to kill you, obviously, or get you killed, pretty much. Okay, moving on to the next thing that I found that can keep people reading along is just having these unanswered questions that are kind of intriguing, that people want to know the answer to, that you don't explain everything right up front. And that can be plot-based or it can be character-based. A lot of people, like the assassin character I was talking about, a lot of people wanted to know his background, which kind of gradually came out over the series. So, and with plot stuff too, maybe there's like this sword or something that it's got this strange backstory and you're trying to solve it. I don't know. I'm horrible at giving examples. Whatever you guys think would be cool is way cooler than anything I could come up with on here. But so unanswered questions to intrigue people.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've got a couple books where I guess I'd like to say I planned it that way, but like for instance, my very first book that we just talked about, I needs work there, but there's a couple of points in there like, okay, well, why am I referencing this one waterfall? Why is it so important? I don't really talk about it. But then like in another book or something, I'll tie into it saying, well, that location is relevant for a reason, and here's why. Or I might come back to it another couple of books down the line and say, well, this is why this person did this. But so as long as you can keep everything continuity-wise going there, and definitely don't want to give everything away too soon, because what's the point of that? Where's the fun in that?
Yeah, and the other thing that's handy is sometimes if you're not sure what questions are the most intriguing ones, pay attention to if you receive any emails because your fans will be asking those questions. It happens to me somewhat frequently where something I thought wasn't terribly important, sort of a throwaway mention at some point in the book, someone will pick up that thread and be like, where's the other end of this? And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we can address that in future stories.
I was thinking the exact same thing when Jeff was talking, because I've had that too, where the things you're like neatly, tidily putting in these little threads that you're going to explain as the series go on. And it's something out of left field. Like I recently had a character ask, because I've got these pilots in the steampunk thing, they all have call signs. And except one of them is just by his name, and that one email was like, when is this character's call sign or nickname going to come out? And so, like, God, you've been dying to know that for 6 books? Okay, I'm going to make up something, and it will come out in the next book. So
Yep.
I do agree that being an indie author and being on Facebook and receiving email and stuff can be useful in finding out what exactly are the burning questions that people have.
Yeah, I have a fan that every time I ask for like a name submission, where I would say like, who would like to name a fictitious character, and I always have the one guy that says, I want to be a lazy dragon. Like, fine, I'll get you in there somewhere. And I finally got him in there, and not the one I'm getting ready to release, but the one prior to that. And apparently, I knew he just read that point. All of a sudden, my Facebook lit up with him going, "Oh my God, I'm a badass color-changing dragon. I can do this, and I'm lazy as sin. Thank you so much. Look, everyone, I'm in this book." I'm like, yeah, well, clearly he just read his part there, so. So yeah, they pay attention, and they have, especially if you're on Facebook, they have no problems contacting you and saying, didn't care for this, or thank you so much, I finally see my character in there. So it's fun though.
Definitely true. My last little thing is just kind of touched on this a little already, but having an overarching plot that spans the whole series, that you actually know from the beginning how it's going to end, and there's like going to be 6 books or whatever to get there, even if your 6th book turns into books 6 and 7, kind of a big 2-parter, totally allowed. And I've done series where you don't have that, where I didn't intend to make it a series either, and it can still work, but it's just so nice and tidy if people can, see that we're working towards this one goal, the evil organization, we're going to defeat them in the end, or we're getting closer each time. I think it's almost like a game in which like people are like, oh, we leveled up, or we're that much closer to achieving our goal, or, you know, it's not necessary, but it can really hold things together, and it can help you when you're writing too, to actually really kind of have that end in mind, and each book you're working toward it. So I would say right now I'm not doing it like that, and it's a little it's a little harder.
I
'Cause
love how you explain it and then you like admit, yeah, I'm not really doing that, but
I did it with my Emperor's Edge series, and I thought it worked out really well because I had like 6 characters, just to congratulate myself and pat myself on the back. But I had 6 kind of characters that were the main character and 6 guys. They all were guys in that book, and so I alternated. Every character got his story as an alternate POV for the main character, and it was 6 books in the end, and it worked out pretty well. And now that I'm not doing that, I'm like, gosh, I wish I had done that in this series. But sometimes, like with my Dragon Blood series, I wasn't going to write a series, so that's how I got into this predicament. I just wrote the first one as a standalone, and then it went and sold, and I was like, well, gosh, let me write some more of these. And so that's how it's been, and I think that's okay, especially if you're doing romance or something where people don't expect the main characters to always continue on and defeat the evil overlord together. But I would say for fantasy and science fiction, it's probably better if there is an end goal that you're working toward, even if it takes 20 books to get there. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is that how you work?
it's not necessarily how I work. Like my Tales of Lantari series. I mean, all the books right now I've got 2 different series, but they're both set in like the same setting, so to speak. And the first one was just the 3 books. I only planned on doing the 3 books, but I was persuaded to keep going, so I created the new one. I pretty much left them as each book is kind of like its own little adventure, set in the same world, and you don't really have to read the like a previous one in order to follow along with. And I've pretty much been keeping along with that too. And I in my mind's eye, I liken it to like the Xanth series from Piers Anthony there, whereas it's all in like a magical kingdom, and he keeps just writing adventures essentially. And the only time I deviated from that is when I was working on my Portal for Your Thoughts, and darn thing blossomed up to well past 100,000. I'm like, I'm gonna have to split the sucker and make a cliffhanger, and I'll go into that here in a little bit. So
I tend to have an overarching plot, but they develop in different ways. Like for the Book of Deacon series, which is sort of my main series, the first 3 books were written at the same time, so there of course was an overarching plot because they essentially were one giant book. And then when I started adding on books, and I'll talk about this aspect of it before, I added them on in positions where they were sort of tacking on to it, like, oh well, this is where that arch started, and this is where that arch will eventually lead. So it was very strong from the get-go. For the science fiction, the sort of dirty secret is I didn't know if I was going to write a series. So the first one was written with an unknown motivation behind a certain character, and the second one was written with an entirely different group that it was implied also had an unknown motivation, and the third book reveals that unknown motivation. And I didn't come up with the motivation until I was writing the third book. So I had people who were telling me like, "Oh wow, I love how you tie it all together. Like you were planning this from the start." I was like, "No, I wasn't. I was planning a question mark to be filled in a later date, and then I filled in a question mark." So you can sort of work an epic sprawling storyline as long as you just sort of leave a hole that's the same shape in every story and then fill that hole later.
And then when people ask you about it, you can say, "Sure, that's exactly what I was doing from start to finish." And you don't have to tell them the little details like, I hadn't a clue how I was going to write all that together, but it worked out fine. So,
Yep. Unless they watch the show and then they know all of my sequels.
there you go.
Those are only the Uber fans that are going to watch you on some YouTube channel
Yep.
talk about self-publishing. Well, yeah, I think it's probably maybe too part of your writing style. If you're somebody that's really organized and likes to have it really laid out, and it doesn't mean you can't change it as you go. Like I'm actually doing my Chains of Honor series, which I only have 1 book out right now. I did plot it all out. I plotted the first 3 books out before I started writing, and then I kind of had a pretty good idea, like a paragraph summary of books 4 and 5 and how everything's going to finish. And I'm excited because I know exactly what's going to happen next, and I like that, even though it might change as I'm going, but not specific details, but I know where the character's starting the next book and where it's going to end up, and it's easier for me to write it that way. But I think you can, I was thinking of Lois McMaster Bujold as somebody who's done a series, the Vorkosigan series, that takes place over a character's lifetime. It starts with the parents in the first two books, and then you've got Miles at like age 18 in the first book, and I think he has his own kids now. So every couple of years he has some epic adventure and goes off. And I'm sure she doesn't have a villain in the background. I think she might have done a couple with kind of the same themes and stuff. But so especially if you're like a real character-driven type of person, or you're planning it to do it over somebody's lifetime, which I guess is another way. It is kind of an overarching plot in that sense. It's just following this person's life or his career in Starfleet or whatever. So it's definitely possible. But at the same time, I think that looking at TV, you see the stuff that gets canceled, Firefly, that wasn't that kind of thing. That was just episodic television where each one was a complete story, which I actually enjoy. I like to be able to just jump in and not have to watch every single week. And I think some of that stuff has not worked as well in recent last decade or two, maybe, as like the Battlestar Galactica kind of thing, where you've got it really, there's side stories and stuff along the way, but they have a real mission that they're trying to do over 4 seasons. And then you can get the cliffhanger things in more easily than if you'd write episodic stuff. It's really can be awkward to tack in a cliffhanger if you've kind of wrapped up the story. Oh, but at the end, here comes a new bad guy, and they're gonna die. So definitely
that comes off as very transparent for the readers, I think, when it's like, oh, look at this sudden unexpected twist right when we were resolving things.
Exactly. So that's just, I don't know, something to think about. You don't have to do it, but it can make it easier. I think it can make the writing process a little easier, and it may lend itself more to really sucking people in and having them have to read the next book, as opposed to if it's a pretty complete story, they'll read the next book when they get around to it, when they get paid. So just some stuff to think about. All right, let's go into Joe's 3 things.
Okie dokie. The first thing is you want to have a strong cast of characters that people care about. And they should have visible, emotional, and intellectual growth over the series. And what I mean by that is interesting characters are flawed, but that doesn't mean you're going to go through and assign each one of these people one very simple flaw that they will overcome. That's their only story trajectory. Even if a character is just sort of just very baseline, they can still get better, and they can still sort of face struggles that overcome them and then overcome those struggles. So what you want to do is get you want people to be invested in your characters, because the more they care. And by the way, if you have got a series going, you're doing this right if you have different people who have different favorite characters. Like, there are competing groups in my fandom who like this character more than that one. I've got side characters that people care about enough that they get spun off into things. So you're doing it right if there's team Edward and team whoever, you know what I mean? So you're trying to inspire that with your characters. And you can do it through any number of ways, but they have to be invested in the overall direction of each of your characters, as opposed to just liking what they say, because otherwise they can dip in and dip out. They'll get their fill and move on. But you also you want to care about what happens next, so you want to care about who it's happening to.
Okay, question for you.
Yep.
Based on what we were just talking about with overarching stuff, do you think, because I think it's kind of true that when you're doing the more episodic stuff where everything's wrapped up and you're leaving it open to more, but you don't necessarily have to write more, that it can be more of a challenge to show that character growth over the course of the series, because especially on TV, they kind of end up in the same place they started usually. Do you think it's easier to show that over a series when you have a bigger story plotted out, as opposed to, I don't know.
I know what you're talking about, and it's true, particularly with episodic stuff where it sort of requires a sort of status quo that people can return to. It's hard to have significant growth, and you can do it, but it sort of becomes the overarching. You start having an overarching plot because it's the saga of these characters trying to break the cycle of going back to status quo almost. I definitely think when people have an absolute goal and you can therefore measure their progress toward it, it's easier to see how well they're growing. But, I mean, episodic television has got plenty of characters that people get invested in, often for the same reasons you listed in yours, where they've got a growing romance or just interpersonal conflict shows up.
Tale of revenge.
Yeah, exactly. So easier to measure growth when it's easier to see how far someone has come when they're headed toward a finish line. But I think you can still have characters that get more interesting even if you wrap up each story individually.
Absolutely.
All right, well
All
said.
right. The next thing I have is you want to have a large. This is particularly so for fantasy, but I mean, Star Wars and Star Trek pull the same stunts. You want to have a large setting that you don't necessarily see all of from the beginning. So, like my Book of Deacon series starts off in what's referred to as the Northern Alliance, and while they're at war with a group of people called the Tressans, you don't get to see any of Tresser because it's entirely from the point of view of people on the northern side of that border. And then the prequel ends up taking place largely in Tresser, so that you can expand. And now there's this you essentially create an entirely new setting, which is established as part of your larger world. So you can keep things fresh and interesting, and you can keep on, sprinkling in mentions of places we haven't been yet for sort of build the mystery of those places. There's at least 2 full continents that have been mentioned multiple times. We've still seen 0 scenes that take place in them in my story. So it gives me a place to go when I need to inject some new stuff. This
That
shows
can
up a
be,
lot in other places, like, what's his name? Elder Scrolls is a game series that every single installment is taking place in a new part of the same world, and Discworld has got so many places, so many named countries.
yeah, that can be a good idea too if you are thinking maybe I'll do a spin-off series someday. Like you might be more likely to get people to try it, even if it's only semi-related to the old stuff, if it's in a different continent, like you said, or some minor character. So that's something to think about if you do kind of get to the point where, yay, I have a series that sells pretty well, and now it's ended. It's like, oh no, that was my best series. That can be a way to get those same people to try the next series.
Yep. It's, you can, all you have to really do is just mention sort of the legacy that the other characters have created, or mention, some of the same places, and it feels enough of the same story that you can carry over fans while at the same time having a whole new set of new toys to play with. And the other thing, the last point I have is, this is something I do, and I think it's a good idea. Multiple points on the map and multiple points in the timeline where you can grow new stories. Like what I was saying earlier, I've got the main trilogy, and if I want to write new stories, I can write lead-ins to that or sequels from that. But I've also got a prequel that takes place a long time prior, and you sort of have to be paying attention to see how long before it is. And now that's a point I can grow off of, so I can lead into that or off of that until it meets the main series. I also have a novella that takes place long, long after the main series, and I can lead off of that or lead into that. So if you want to really keep your series going and you're afraid that it's going to get stale if you keep on revisiting the same characters, you can sort of split it into eras, or, like I was saying, split it into different locations on the map. And what that also does is sort of the readers start to build the overall setting in their head, and the overall timeline in their head, and they start to see where the gaps are, and they start getting excited when the ends of the eras start to touch, and you're going to finally see the whole picture. So I think it's a handy thing to do, is sort of give yourself multiple seed points for stories.
I was thinking when you were talking about that, we haven't had him on the show yet, but I'd like to someday. But Ed Robertson did that with he's got a dystopian series that just he sold zillions of those things. I don't know. They sold really well. He was been on the self-publishing podcast a couple of times, and he last year I know he did like a space opera series, which the dystopian thing I think was set like 50 years in the future or something, and then he's like, I'm going to make the space opera set in the same universe, same thing as the dystopian. And I don't know how well it worked, how many fans actually said, oh, yeah, I'll cross genres because it's 1,500 years in the future, but it's the same world. But I thought that was a sneaky way to try to get people to do it.
Yeah, I mean, sci-fi people do it a lot in the movies. Like, technically, Blade Runner and Alien take place in the same setting, according to Ridley Scott. And you can see little evidence of it, like the Weyland-Yutani logo showing up and characters like that being common to the 2 series. So, like, yeah, like people get super excited when they find evidence of the meshing point between the two eras.
Predator 2.
Yes.
With the alien skull there.
Yes, that's true. Right at the beginning, that is a prop guy stunt that grew into an entire crossover franchise. Like, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have read those or watched those first 3 Star Trek or Star Wars movies. Well, whatever, the prequel movies, if not for the previous, you know, the ones I enjoyed, the originals. But you do. You like this. I hate this movie. I hate Anakin. I hate all this stuff. But let me see. I want to see how everything happens and comes into play. So it
Yep.
worked. They got me.
Yeah, those are the 3 points I had. Jeff, what about you?
My first point is I've always believed your characters have got to be strong and relatable, and something that obviously that the reader is going to be caring about. I have had numerous people all tell me, after they read the books, that oh, I've got a husband and wife team is pretty much the main protagonist there, and I've got so many people that tell me that, hey, man, your Steve character is just like my husband, and I'm just like Sarah. It's nice to see a married couple bicker like crazy, but still clearly love each other and have it's a good time doing it and thrust into these situations. Just tell me essentially a recap of my own book, which I thought, yeah, that's nice. I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you can relate to it. But I've always thought that the characters, got to be strong and you've got to be able to believe that there's such a person that actually does exist. And if you do, you start caring about them. Like, hey, what's going to happen next? And that's what got my Bakian Chronicles trilogy right off the ground, because those things sold well. Because as soon as I released number one and made it perma-free, thanks to you, Lindsay, I made number two came out too, just blew up the charts, and I'm just thrilled to death about it. And number three did the same, because obviously if I did number two, I was going to have to do number three. But yeah, relatable characters is good. Then I agree with you somewhat, Lindsay, what you said earlier is like you got to keep some aspects of the story in the dark. You don't want to give away anything right off the bat. Keep the reader guessing, and if possible, throw in some plot twists. Cliffhangers are good, but I have learned, don't ever mess with a cliffhanger unless you are ready to, like, just about ready to release the second one there, or you will. I had numerous reviews for like that Portal for Your Thoughts that said specifically, I love the book, but I was about ready to ding you down in the ratings just because you left it on a cliffhanger. But thankfully, the cliffhanger was coming out in less than a month, so okay, I won't knock you down for that. I'm like, thank you. So I don't know how other people's handle cliffhangers there, but me, that's like walking on a really thin wire there. It's like, do I do it or do I not? But it works in selling books. It's just you got to face the backlash if you can't get your book out quick enough in time. That's pretty much there. And I've always believed in adding humor. I mean, I always like. I'm not a very serious writer. I don't really like the dark situations. It'll be the times that I've had to write real dark there, I've deliberately thrown in the humor just because I like writing lighthearted, fun fantasy adventure stories, that sort of thing. That's what works well for me. That's what sells well. So I will deliberately throw in jokes, or all I got to do is imagine myself in that situation and what would happen if I tried this. Whether I trip, fall face first onto the ground, or whether I'm trying to sit down and on my knees crack because I'm getting old, stuff like that. And I mean, once you write it in there, people laugh, and literally, as I put in the notes there, I've had amazing amount of people contact me and said, "Man, your book's funny as hell. I actually woke up my wife reading this because I was reading it at night and I laughed so loud I woke her up, and I had to explain what I was laughing at." I was like, "I will take that as a compliment." So strong, relatable characters. Don't reveal all your plot twists, and then add some humor into there, for at least for me, anyways. That's what's worked.
All right, and I'd love to touch on the point that you mentioned in your characters that they must be believable characters. I think in science fiction and fantasy, there's this tendency to want to write the superhero, the assassin that's undefeatable, the knight who's never been conquered, and those can be great. We love reading about those kind of characters, but they either have to be human, or for me, usually that'd be kind of the sidekick character for me, or like not the main focus. I'll make the main character very human and relatable and flawed, and because I do think that's almost like a lazy way out. When I know when people say I want strong female characters in science fiction and fantasy, and so every other book is like some chick in leather pants kicking ass, and they're ridiculous. Some of the, as somebody who used to do like karate and taekwondo, I'm like, you just can't beat up guys that have equal levels of skill that have been in it and trained too. Like they're much faster than we are as women, or much stronger. Just I used to get my butt kicked regularly by people of my belt rank in that, being in the military too, it's like you can't just pick up a guy and sling him over your shoulder. There's some things as a woman you can't do. So I get very skeptical by those kind of scenes as a reader, and it's possible you'll lose me if they're not, if they have superpowers. That's one thing, but if they're just supposed to be a human being and they have all these powers, it's not. I find it not realistic. I find
Yeah,
there are other ways that you can win without necessarily being able to beat the crap out of 12 guys that attack you in the alley at night.
right. Yeah.
Um,
Because if you write in fantasy and you write in sci-fi, you have to be able to suspend your disbelief long enough to believe what's going on there. But if you get a scene that's just like, for instance, if I wrote a book this way, and I actually had a couple fans call me on it. It's like, the book's good, characters are good, but nothing bad ever seems to happen to them. Nothing ever goes as perfectly as that does. There, I'm like, yeah, you got a point. So in the next consecutive books, there, I deliberately started throwing wrenches in the works, and I will say that I've had a lot of fun with it. So, but you were in Taekwondo too?
yeah, it's one of those things I want to get back to one day. I think karate was better for me just for, it seemed like we had more realistic battles, I guess, when you're out there sparring. In Taekwondo, you were like, yeah, let's do spinning roundhouse kicks and stuff that would probably get you knocked on your butt if you ever tried it in real life.
Yeah,
But
seriously. I was about 4 or 5 months before getting my black belt, and I had to move. So I mean, I'm 6'3". I'm about 250. Apparently, Taekwondo is not necessarily geared towards people my size. I remember walking into this place, and the instructor, the head instructor, who is like chest level to me, maybe he's 5'6" or something, goes like this and goes, "Huh, you're gonna be fun." And I was a freaking guinea pig. It was like anytime there was ever a girl that said, "Man, you're not gonna be able to take down someone bigger than you," the guy's like, "Okay, Jeff, come on over." I'm like, "Crap, here we
you're going to
go."
get thrown again.
And I have never met the ground so damn fast in all my life. Man, 1 minute I was standing and I'm on the ground. He's like, "And that's how you do it." And they're like, "Oh, can you do that again in slow motion?" I'm like, "Yeah, great, thanks, love to." So yeah, I mean, I've actually got some scenes where the characters are fighting, and I've actually started drawing on the Taekwondo, going, okay, I can make this more believable because I've sparred like this, and if you twist here, grab this person right there, shift your weight over to here, you can make the person go literally flying through the air. But yeah, so it helps.
Yeah, I think it's good as a fantasy author or science fiction author to take something. I did fencing too for not for very long. It's another thing I'd love to get back into someday, but it really helps you get that perspective of what it's like. So,
Hmm.
but anyway, I just wanted to throw out my point there that we don't have to have an uber character because it can actually be kind of boring and less interesting if they just kick everybody's butt all the time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The more invincible somebody is, the less interesting they are. And, the unconventional solutions to problems are always the ones you rather read anyway. So somebody who just powers through the solution with their one unstoppable ability every single time is just lose the reader's interest sooner or later.
And it can be, I think it's good to give your hero maybe one thing they're quite good at or something because I feel the reader does want to like live vicariously through somebody that's maybe a little better, a little more competent than they are or gets to do cooler things and things work out. I've got one character that's like an ace pilot and another one that's an awesome sniper and they're perfectly normal other than these skills, but and it makes them kind of heroic, I think. But anyway, I guess we've rambled enough about characters. I think it's important that we all put that in our thing, and I agree that as a reader myself, an author who's really good at making awesome characters. I mentioned Bujold earlier. She's someone I think is really good at this. You don't even notice sometimes that maybe the plot in this one is a little slow, or the editor could have taken out 100 pages without losing anything, because you get really invested in these people's lives. And some of that I think is a little bit of a knack. It's kind of hard to just say, write good characters. You know, touching on Jeff's other thing, the humor thing, that can be, I don't know, I think it's kind of hard to learn if it's not intuitive for you. I'm sure you can learn a few things. I've definitely found that I also write with a lot of humor, especially in dialogue. That's kind of, I almost was tempted to go into screenwriting at one point, but and I think if you just give your characters some quirks, that you can get a lot of mileage out of that. I know in the original Star Trek, a lot of people, like a lot of female viewers, enjoyed the relationship between Spock and McCoy and Kirk, just to show we don't always want a romance. Although there
Yeah,
were some fan fictions that made that
yeah.
interesting.
I
But
think the original slash fiction is in reference to that.
yeah,
Wow, you reference Battlestar Galactica, then you reference Star Trek. All right, I am impressed.
this is a science fiction and fantasy show. We have to know the Foundation series.
Darn right.
Uh, but
Well, what
I
I can
like to use the TV stuff because I think more people have seen all that stuff.
Yeah, with regards to the humor, what I can also mention is what's easy for me with the humor is dude, all I got to do is write about what happens to me. I'm apparently a little bit of a klutz. So if I trip on a shoelace, go craning headfirst into a wall, or if I'm trying to act real, real like macho around my wife, like, haha, I can lift this thing up. I lift it up, and my back cracks, or else I smack into the wall with the thing, drop it on my foot. My wife's looking at me like, oh my god, I actually said I do to this man. This is just sad. But I mean, stuff like that. I mean, it's stuff that you can go, okay, well, how could I? What this would be funny if I made this person do that. And I was like, okay, that might be good. I can, and every time I hand it to my wife, and she proofreads it, and I hear her laugh out loud. I was like, what part you read? She's like, shut up, I'll tell you later. I'm like, so it helps.
Yeah, and I think that's something that can kind of endear your characters to people, as if they do make them laugh. And I was going to say with Spock and McCoy, like Spock was such an interesting character, that he had so much that could be made fun of. He was like the ultimate straight man, right? And so McCoy was the funny man, and so it was a good comedy duo there. And that's something you can do when you're building your characters, is sort of give them a couple quirks. Like I have in my pen name series, the captain never sits down, and because he's paranoid. He's like an ex-special forces kind of guy. They might be sneaking up on you. So you get a lot of mileage on that, like, oh, how are you going to make out with a woman if you can't sit on the couch together? And it's fun to play with. Little things like that can be ongoing jokes as the series continues. And then when it pops up again 5 books later, they totally remember like what that's in reference to, because those little things stick in your mind. So.
Yeah, I've also found that humor is a good way to take a character that people aren't going to particularly like and make them like the pairing. Because I had 2 characters in the trilogy, Ivy and Ether, who, when they are people don't like Ether, one of the least popular characters, but the Ivy and Ether scenes are among some of the most commented upon scenes, because they just are so. There's so much friction between the 2 characters, and the dialogue that results from them just basically not liking each other, it turns out to be kind of hilarious. So I give people like my least favorite character, but don't get rid of her, because these 2 work so well together. So it's a good way to, I don't know, to take a weakness and turn it into a strength if you sort of see it developing that way.
And just so people who are listening don't think you don't have to have romance, or not romance, humor. You don't have to have romance either. But I do think that it's the kind of thing where if it's just not your cup of tea, that it can easily read as forced to the reader, like they're trying too hard to be funny.
Don't force a laugh. Don't force a laugh. It comes through so well.
And I don't even know how to suggest how you would develop it if it's not kind of, because I've actually known people who are very funny when you meet them, and their writing, there's no humor whatsoever in their writing. So I don't know, it seems to be sort of some people just kind of have that knack for that, and others
don't.
Got to stick with the serious, dramatic stuff, or because it can be painful. And I'll see it in first person a lot in like urban fantasy, the contemporary stuff, where they're just trying too hard. Like every third line is a joke, and I think it works better when it's just maybe a little bit in the dialogue, or like Jeff was saying, a little in the situation. They sit up and crack their head on the bunk on top of them. I've done that. So.
Yeah, I think that jokes don't really, like gags maybe, but jokes don't really have too much of a place in things. And I've at least once had a character where the humor came not from the fact that not from the jokes that he was telling, but from the fact he was telling jokes. Like, this is not a situation where that's supposed to happen. The punchline was irrelevant. It was the fact that he was making light of a situation that should be terrifying. So it's like, yeah, I agree. Like, humor's going to have to be organic, or it's going to feel like you just sort of threw it on like ketchup to make something taste better.
Good analogy.
I'm good with analogies. I'm like good.
All right. Well, for the last few minutes of the show, these are kind of some questions I've gotten before from readers, or just from other people I see out there on keyboards and stuff. And I would love to hear what you guys think too. So, like, if somebody's asking you, when is it time to end a series or switch to other project if maybe you've published a few books and they just really haven't caught on, you haven't gotten many reviews, you haven't sold many books, when do you give up and try something new?
Good one.
On my okay, when do you give up on something new? When I what do you call it? The ill-fated superhero book that I mentioned earlier. If you obviously terrible sales, is a good indicator, but everything has terrible sales from the beginning if you don't have an established series. So you can't just use that. But for me, it's like if you know that you've had a couple of readers, if and just no one seems excited about it, the lack of excitement, either even if it's a good selling series, I think the lack of excitement is when you sort of pull the plug on it, where it's just like you know, I just don't want to write the next one. I think really it's if it's hard to tell when you don't have a lot of readers, but when you have readers and they just aren't really enthusiastic about the story, there's not a lot of reviews or anything like that, that's a good indicator that maybe you should move on and try something else. Or if it's just gone on for, like, you don't want to keep it, don't go more than 3 books deep into a series that's not selling well. If you've got 3 books out and it's not selling well, at the very least leave it and try another one. It would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I would see that. I mean, if you've tried a couple, they're just not selling well, then I mean, yeah, that's hard. You can like try to see if anyone picks it up, or you can try making like book one perma free. Just see if it picks up. If it doesn't, then yeah, you know what? Just move on to something else. There's no point to trying to force the series to be alive when it's just not getting the traction that you think it deserves. Just why waste your time on it?
Yeah, I would think that, actually what I'm trying to do now when I start new things, especially with the pen name, is write like 3 before I before I even publish the first one, because it's very easy if you publish the first one and you don't get, it's like crickets, or you get a bad review, to get discouraged, when sometimes all it needs is enough books in the series to kind of gain some traction. With 3 books, you can start doing book 1 at 99 cents or perma-free, and then getting them to sell through the other ones at full price. But yeah, I probably wouldn't do more than 4 or 5 if the sales weren't there at that point. And I would also, like, if you're listening to it and you're like, wow, that's me, I definitely go over on the Writers Cafe on Kboards, or ask some people that don't like you very much, what do you think of my covers? What do you think of these blurbs? Because I'm always amazed at how many people don't seem to have much awareness. They think their covers are awesome. Unlike me, I know my covers have issues, some of the older ones. But like, some people don't see that in their own stuff, and it can be really hard. We're like that with our fiction too. We don't see the flaws always, or you see all the flaws and you don't see the good stuff. People tend to go one of the 2 ways. And so I've seen a lot of people give up on a series, and then you're like, wow, I can't even tell from your covers that that's supposed to be epic fantasy. So I would first kind of check that, get some outside opinions and see if maybe you need different covers, or if your blurbs are dry or something like that. But yeah, there comes a time when I think, especially if you're trying to make money at this, which a lot of us are, that you have to go, let me just set this aside, and try something new. I've seen several cases where people who were writing epic fantasy didn't really gain much traction as authors until they went on and wrote urban fantasy. I think Patricia Reed was that way. It seems like I was surprised to find she had an epic fantasy series. I was like, whoa, did anybody read these? Not really, but she sells tremendously well with the urban fantasy. And I think Rachel Aaron, too, had some success with her fantasy series, but she really did well with the space opera. So you never know what's going to click for people. And if you only have one series, you're kind of limiting yourself. I remember seeing one guy that had like 10 books he'd published in one series that just wasn't selling. And that takes a lot of time you're investing there if they're never going to sell. So
Yeah.
I'd probably put it at like 4 if you've tried the cover changes already and kind of tried tweaking categories and descriptions and that kind of thing. They might be trying to try something new.
It's worth pointing out, if you leave a series for being unsuccessful, these are ebooks and they're on a shelf forever. So it could always leap back to life with somebody just sharing the first book. So just because it doesn't work now and you had to move on to another series doesn't mean that it's gone forever.
Very true.
And if you have something that hits later, people may go back and check out your other books too. So it doesn't necessarily mean you wasted 5 years of your life or something like that.
Yeah, like you wrote this story a couple of years ago. When's the next one coming out? Flash Gold, excuse me. So
I don't know who he's talking to. All right, last little question. When does it make sense to consider a spin-off series? And we kind of touched on this before, but have you guys What do you guys think? Have you done spin-off series?
I personally haven't done a spin-off series, but I would think that obviously if your series is selling well, and I would like maybe you're starting to get fan email reviews that say like, man, I really love this other character. I think it would be great to have a story about him, sort of thing. When you start getting people interested in him, I would say, you know what, it's nice, good to give it a try. I'd say main thing though is your series has got to be selling, or what's the point?
Yeah, I have done spin-off series, sort of. Actually, kind of a lot of them. The main I asked after the trilogy was out, I asked the fans what character they'd most like to see a solo book from, and it was an overwhelming response that they wanted a certain character. They wanted to learn more about a certain character, and I suspect it was actually an attempt for me to bring back that character because, whatever. But I did a prequel instead, and like, so obviously, if an overwhelming portion of your fans really really like one of your characters, and that character maybe isn't central to the story, then it's a good idea to centralize something on that and see if that character can carry it by itself, and if maybe that's a better thing. I've also done it with a lot of my side characters where they're like they jump off the page, but they only have a very small part in the main story. Is to sort of give them like a short, like that's the only time I write a short thing, is to sort of look at one of the little character who has like 60 pages overall out of hundreds and hundreds of pages. Let them sort of shine on their own in a shorter thing.
Right. Definitely, this is the opposite of the first question. Like, when do you give up a series? This is like, when should I spin it off because it was so popular? Because I found that once you get up to like maybe book 7, 8, you're probably not going to get random people jumping into the series. So you're limiting yourself to people who have followed along since the beginning. Unless you're Jim Butcher, and Dresden Files number 12 is a perfectly logical place to jump into the series. And if you've done it kind of episodically, that could be the case. But for me, I can't really advertise later books in the series, because you need to have read the earlier ones for them to make sense. So I think that's when it's something to think about, is if you want a new place, a new series that has all the same readers, hopefully, but could potentially bring in more readers because you're starting something new and people can take it as a place to jump in. That would be my thoughts on that. And I may do that with my current series, so we'll see in the future. All right, Jeff, did you have a question somebody gave us?
Let's see here. Yeah, this is from a little bit ago. This is from a question from a guy named Justin Blair. Justin writes, hello, I've been watching and enjoying your podcast. There's a lot of great information for marketing there. I have a question that I haven't seen answered yet, but forgive me if you have already answered it. Should first-time self-published authors set up a new Amazon account to publish on Kindle, or is it preferable to simply use an existing one? Are there any disadvantages for using an existing Amazon account? In my case, there is a special circumstance. I created and directed a documentary called Across the Forest about the belief in vampires, werewolves, and forest spirits in Transylvania. I spent 9 months there interviewing villagers and collecting and filming their stories. I've been using a third-party distributor to sell the DVDs, but will soon set up Amazon Instant Video for the product. Though this is not a book, it is another Amazon product which I own and will distribute. Does this play into the decision? Would it be bad to blend these two products, if that would even happen in the Amazon system, since they are not the same type? And I would personally say, as long as if you've got the Amazon account, it shouldn't. I would say just keep using the existing Amazon account. I don't think Amazon cares one way or the other.
Yeah, it's actually everything you have under your account. I have my pen name under my account, so you can put whatever name you want on the books you publish. And it's really up to you if you want to use the same name to, if you're writing science fiction or something, maybe that you want a different name for that. It probably wouldn't matter, but you don't need a new account for sure. It's just the question is whether you want a pen name or a different name for the actual published by thing. And that's just something that you will enter in the little wizard form thing. You just pick your name that you're putting in there, and you don't, as of right now, you don't need any documentation or anything for your pen names or other names. So.
Yeah. Plus, honestly, having a separate account is going to complicate things like, record keeping and accounting and stuff like that, because you're going to have to sort of have separate spreadsheets and separate you're already going to get a lot of different 1099s, but you don't want to complicate matters more by having more accounts than you need to.
Remember the recurring theme of this episode: laziness.
Laziness. Yes.
You want to make sure everything's as easy as possible. So, thanks, Justin, for your question. We appreciate it.
Oh, I think my dog's telling me it's time to go. He's flapping his ears and trying to get up, so we must be done for the day.
Yep.
All right. All right. Well, if you guys don't have anything else, I guess that's it. And thanks for listening, everyone. We could use a few more reviews in iTunes just in case you want to stop by and say you enjoyed the show, especially if you enjoyed the show.
Yes.
Stop by and say that certain someone needs to finish a certain series. That would be cool too.
No, that's my Facebook page where you're supposed to go to nag.
I was specifying you specifically there, Lindsay.
Of course.
No comprendo.
Don't you have a cliffhanger you need to resolve or something?
I already resolved it.
All right. Well, that's it for us for this week.
Alrighty.
You guys take it
So
easy.
long, everybody.
Bye, guys.